Medieval Europe in the first place lived under the yoke of fanatical faith. Therefore, the Holy Fathers ruled everything in its life. And we mean literally everything. Churchmen even made written instructions on how to make love properly. Poses and sounds. Today it sounds crazy, but only one pose was prescribed categorically: missionary. Any change could be interpreted as a diabolical obsession. Any disobedient could at best wait a serious corporal punishment, and at worst could be sent to the stake. And for the most part, the punishments of course concerned women. Society pretended that men had nothing to do with it, and it was women who were to blame for everything. Also, the church strictly forbade moving during intercourse, let alone making any sounds. Again, here any disobedient could be accused of being possessed by evil spirits. By the way, this ban led to both a terrible and curious case. The husband, returning from hunting, shared a bed with his wife, having slept with her in strict accordance with the canons established by the church. In the morning, the man discovered that his wife was dead. Moreover, apparently she was already dead at the moment of intimacy. The case was handled by the Pope himself. On the one hand, the man committed an unprecedented sacrilege, but on the other hand, it was not his fault. The wife lay, not moving, did not make any sounds. So why was it his fault then? Only after that the church allowed unfortunate women to move at least a little and make sounds, so that the spouse was sure that his beloved was alive. In general, at the time, the church literally looked into all the windows and cracks to make sure that the parishioners conscientiously observed all the prescriptions. After all, the devil does not sleep. He is ready at any moment to seduce a fragile soul. True, in terms of postures, noble and wealthy people still manage to break church stubbornness. Officially, in addition to the missionary, as many as 4 poses were allowed: standing, on the side, sitting, and behind. And more, no, otherwise the disobedient could be burned at the stake. Keepers of the faith. For understandable religious reasons, the church categorically insisted that the bride walk to the crown in her integrity like the Blessed Virgin Mary. And in marriage, no distraction to other men were allowed. This ban, in fact, had a prosaic reason. Any noble husband had to be 100% sure that the child was his. Therefore, when the spouse went on a military campaign or simply left for a long time on business, the wife was supposed to wear the so-called chastity belt, a metal structure with holes for natural needs, which was locked with a key. The key, of course, was taken by the spouse. The only exception was the case when the spouse was pregnant. Then, in the presence of a blacksmith and 1 or more representatives of the church, the belt was removed. Moreover, an appropriate document was necessarily drawn up for the act of removal. Judicial cases. It is also strange that often issues of this nature were resolved not just in court but also publicly. For example, Pope Alexander III obliged women to make love with their legal spouse under any circumstances, even if he was sick with leprosy. For the sake of justice, it should be noted that a woman could also demand a division of the bed from her husband, so that at least here her rights were relatively respected. However, don't be too positive about it. At the trial, by the way, orientation was tested and even male strength. There is a case in history where a wife accused her husband of impotence. The court decided to check this fact in an ordinary brothel. It was so wild that one of the churchmen deliberately touched the man's organ to make sure that it was working, then carefully controlled the process with the prostitute, after which the accused, roughly speaking, allocated the evidence of his male power directly into the hands of the churchman. This smeared hand also became proof that the man did not suffer from sexual impotence, and that the woman was to blame in this case. Moreover, the most cunning and, to put it mildly, rather vile men could officially get rid of their wives simply accusing them of allegedly stealing male power. Again, in the presence of incorruptible church court, everyone had to be convinced that, so to speak, a man was not able to get it up. And if he was able to do it with a brothel girl, then the legal wife deliberately bewitched him in order to steal his male power. True, there were no cases of death penalty for such a sin. However, it is a fact that this way men finally received their freedom. The church's understanding of rape was also wild from today's point of view. Initially, the rape of the enemy's wife was considered a humiliation of the enemy and an attempt of his property. The church improved this postulate a little, stating that rape for the purpose of forcing marriage was not a crime at all. There's a case where a woman accused a man of rape. The court ordered the accused to go to her and collect the money. However, the plaintiff resisted fiercely, and the rapist returned without money. In the end, he was acquitted, because if a woman was able to protect her money from that man, then she could well protect her body from him. She just didn't want it. Same-sex love. On the one hand, sodomy by the church was punishable by death immediately and without options. Sodomites were burned at the stake without pity or regret. At the same time, the same church allowed bestiality. There is a known case where a gang of sodomites were publicly executed who raped a certain apprentice. Later, the rapist victim was caught being intimate with a domestic animal. The young man was threatened with death, but he said that after what he had experienced, he could not look at girls, even though there was a desire. Therefore, he decided to relieve tension with lifestyle. Again, the fact that his male organ was not working properly was verified by the judges in the brothel. As a result, it was proved that the apprentice was telling the truth. And indeed, it did not work. By the way, it should be noted that male same-sex love still existed, and almost officially. The well-known couples, a knight and a young squire, were formed for a reason. Very often, the young squire of a noble knight not only carried armor, but also helped to warm the bed on long and harsh campaigns. The only thing that has always baffled the church is the relationships between women. Interesting that in such relationships there was no direct penetration, so there was nothing to be forbidden. Therefore, it was not clear what to incriminate the two beauties, both homelessness and sin. The most incredible and wild thing is that despite the cruel canons and restrictions, the ministers of the church themselves were forced to commit sins, and even against their own will. For example, nuns who went either on pilgrimage to holy places or to some significant religious events never received enough funds from the Holy Fathers to at least not simply die of hunger. Therefore, on the way, women and girls were forced to engage in prostitution. When a nun returned to her native monastery, she was obliged to pay the money earned by hard sexual labor, so to speak, to the general treasury. After all, the servants of the Lord, monks and nuns, did not have the right to have any savings. The rules of the rich and the poor. Most of the prohibitions of the church as a rule were more respected by wealthy and noble people as well as townspeople. For the rural people, everything was much simpler and more mundane. Premarital meetings of the young were practiced. If the girl got pregnant, then they got married. And if the youth understood that they were not suitable for each other, then they parted without offense. The custom of the wife in the guest's bed was also quite widespread. And the most vile was the tradition of the right of the first night. When the poor man got married, his master had the right to take the newlywed to his place for the first night. This, by the way, often became one of the causes of bloody upsprings.